Szanowni Państwo, chciałbym bardzo serdecznie Państwa przywitać na dzisiejszej konferencji Fundacji Court Watch Polska organizowanej wspólnie.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you at today's conference of Court Watch Polska Foundation, co-organized together with the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Poland. I would like to welcome, first of all, Her Excellency, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Netherlands in Poland, Daphne Bergsma, and all the representatives of the Commission of the Selection of Courts, and National Commission for the Selection of Judges in the Netherlands. And I would like to welcome also the presidents of courts, judges, professors, representatives of academia, representatives of organizations and associations of judges, councils, lawyers, representatives of NGOs, employees of the justice systems, judiciary system. I'm so happy that there are so many people here today with us to discuss the issue of the future, how competitions for the judges are organized in the Netherlands, and how we can transform or implement those principles in Poland. Before I pass the floor to Ambassador of the Netherlands to take the floor, I would like to mention one very important person. On Friday, we have found out that Judge Katarzyna Gonera departed, an unusual person, very wise person. She unfortunately died on Friday, and she can be a role model. Not only a role model of a judge, but a role model of a human being. She was participating in the preparation of standards and principles of appointment of judges published by the European Network in the Dublin Declaration as a representative of the National Judiciary Council. And I would like to ask you to celebrate the remembrance of a judge for 1 minute, with 1 minute of silence. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Please take the floor to open the conference.
Zapraszam do zabrania głosu.
You worry, it's not COVID. I'm not going to be the big COVID spreader of today's event, but I'm having a severe cold, and I thought it was better in order to protect you and also myself to wear the face masks. But it's not COVID, I tested and it was okay. This is just to reassure you. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed experts, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, surrounded by so much legal expertise on a crucial topic close to our hearts, the rule of law. I would first like to thank Court Watch Poland for organizing today's conference about one of the key elements of a democratic rule of law, and that is a merit-based judicial selection system. Court Watch has dedicated multiple projects to this topic and has even visited the Netherlands to study the most recent modernization of our judicial selection procedure and exchange thoughts with Dutch legal professionals. I'm pleased that the Netherlands Embassy has been able to support such projects throughout the years. Today, again, legal experts from both our countries have been brought together to share knowledge and best practices on this complex yet vital theme. Luckily, I can leave it up to them, up to you, to discuss this in more detail later on. But I do wish to take the opportunity to touch upon a broader question that is oftentimes posed to me, namely, why does the Netherlands attach such importance to the rule of law and support projects in this field? This perhaps merits a conference of its own, but I will try to be brief and shed light on the answer from three perspectives. First, from a national perspective. This year, the Netherlands celebrates the 175th anniversary of the Dutch Constitution of 1848, which laid the foundation for our parliamentary democracy. And although the Constitution has been expanded ever since, some of the articles have remained unchanged for decades, such as Article 9t. This article states that the Dutch government shall promote the development of the international legal order. Nowadays, this is among others reflected in The Hague, a city which has become known as the International City of Peace and Justice, with so many renowned international organizations dedicated to fostering peace and security. Therefore, one could argue that rule of law has become part of our country's DNA. Poland has a long-standing legal heritage too. Back in the 16th century, the Polish Crown Tribunal, located in Lublin, settled many disputes and became known as one of the first European Supreme Courts to operate independently from the monarch's superiority. And 2 centuries later, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth adopted the first written constitution in Europe. Recently, I learned that the author of the Polish national anthem, Józef Wybicki, studied law at Leiden University in the 18th century. So one could say that even back then, law was a binding factor between our countries, as is the case today. The second perspective is a European perspective. The Netherlands is one of the founding fathers of the European Union and has always felt co-responsible for its well-being. We strongly believe that the European Union is and must remain a community of values with strong foundations in the rule of law. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights is clear on this. The peoples of Europe are resolved to share a peaceful future based on common values. We can only realize this peaceful future by remaining true to these common values: respect for democracy, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law lie at the heart of the European cooperation. And these foundations of our cooperation, of our European family, must be nurtured, now and in the future. And why must we nurture it? This brings me to my third and final observation from a multilateral perspective. The rule of law is fundamental to international peace, security, political stability, and prosperity. It's not only crucial to achieve economic and social progress and development, but also to protect people's rights and fundamental freedoms all over the world. With that in mind, I want to mention the Ukrainian men and women who are fighting tirelessly for the independence of their country, for our security, and for values that are our values too: freedom, self-determination, human rights, and the rule of law. Their determination fills me with admiration and is a constant reminder that these values that we hold dear are never self-evident. Are never self-evident and require our constant attention on national, European, and multilateral level. I wish you an insightful and fruitful conference. Thank you very much. Now, I almost managed to the end. Pleasure.
And let me.
Yes, sorry.
Let me hand you the the report that we have prepared thanks to your help and help of your colleagues from the LSR. Thank you that we could accomplish this work, and let it remind you the gratefulness of our team, and we hope that we could help not only our justice system, but also justice systems in other countries to develop more merit-based selection system as the one that we could observe in Utrecht in the Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you very
your
much.
assistance.
And I will read it under my Christmas tree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Now let me introduce Judge Esmee Heuts and Judith Schoenmakers. Pozwolicie Państwo, że zaproszę sędzię Esmee Heuts i panią kierownik Judith Schoenmakers.
If you allow me, I would like to invite Esmee Heuts and Judith Schoenmakers, two judges that work in LSA, so National Commission for the Selection of Judges, with the seat in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And they will tell us about the functioning of this institution, how is it located in the Dutch system, and how this procedure is being organized. I'm sure you know, because you've read the program of the conference, Judge Heuts is the member of the commission. She's a judge as well. She works at the civil division of the district court. And Judith is a lawyer. She works at the Office for Judges Selection, and she supports the recruitment of judges and also in the private sector.
Thank you. It's already working, I assume. I would just wanted to mention that I put off my headset, so I assumed you did our introduction, because my Polish is really bad. So already thanks to the interpreters in the back, because everything else for us is very clear to follow. We are here to introduce to you the way we select our judges in the Netherlands. We're going to do a co-presentation together. So I start by explaining a little on how the system in the Netherlands works. And then we start with, I think, this one, yes. We have, as we call it, the Raad voor de Rechtspraak. It's the Council of Judiciary. And that council is responsible for the recruitment and selection of judges and judges in the courts of appeal. So in the district courts and the courts of appeal. After judges are selected, I should say judges to be, because they go into training in either the district court or the court of appeal. And it is regulated in the Article 91 of the law on the organization of the courts. The task of the Raad voor de Rechtspraak, the Council of Judiciary, is delegated to the National Selection Committee of Judges, as we call it, LSR. It is Dutch Landelijk Selectiecommissie voor Rechters. This is the committee that does the selection. We don't do that all by ourselves. We have a lot of help, I would say, from LTP and from the selectors, which we will tell about later. But let me start with some data so you can put everything we're going to tell you a little bit into perspective. The Netherlands have about 17.5 million inhabitants. The judiciary in the Netherlands exists of 12,000 employees. There are a lot of judges, of course, about 2,600, but about 9,500 other employees, like IT employees, the clerks, of course, ushers, and everybody that works at the courts. Very important to notice, because I understood that in Poland it works a little different. Every judge in the Netherlands is assisted by employees that are academic, into law, so they help us prepare a case, they help us at the court hearing, and they help us afterwards in writing the decision. So the work of those employees is very important in the judicial systems in the Netherlands. The number of decisions taken by the Dutch judges are more than 1.5 million. And just to show you a little more figures, more than 1.38 million cases are new every year. And to give you a little insight, we put ahead on what diversity of cases we have. Like administrative law is a very small part of the cases. The civil law, including family law, is about 18%. Criminal law, a lot of attention in the media, but in the real court decisions is just a small part, about 12%. And then the civil cases up to 25,000 amount in euros. That is the very, very big part of the decisions we take. But take in mind that in that figures, the last one, there's also cases like, for instance, on guardianship and everything that goes with that. That's a lot of cases too. To help you see what the role is of the Council for the Judiciary, we put it in a constitutional position in this figure. Of course, on here on I have to, the next one, yes. On the right side, you see, of course, the Parliament, the Ministry of Justice and Security, and Public Prosecution Service is, of course, part of the judicial system. But directly next to the Ministry of Justice is the Council for the Judiciary, the Raad voor de Rechtspraak, as we call it. They have support services, of course. They are not in a direct leading position to the district courts or the courts of appeal, but they take, as we say, a lot of overhead, and they are the direct partner for the Ministry of Justice. We have 11 district courts in the Netherlands. We have 4 courts of appeal, and at the top you see the different types of Supreme Courts we have. We have 1 Supreme Court, we have the Council of State, we have a Trade and Industry Appeals Tribunal, and we have a Central Appeals Tribunal. Depending on what case is in the district court or the Court of Appeal, from there on it goes to either the Supreme Court, the Council of State, the Central Appeals Tribunal, or the Trade and Industry Appeals Tribunal. I hope this will give you a little insight, so you know how the LSR is stated in this constitutional. Then we dive a little deeper into the way we select and later on appoint our judges. We have the LSR, the National Committee on Selection of Judges. They have the task to select and later on appoint the selectors of the LSR. We have a directive. The last one was stated in 2020. We update it every few years, depending on all the insights we get from the procedures earlier on. And the Council of Judiciary, they recruit the members of the board of the LSR and the selectors. The selection committee that does that job consists of a member of the Council of the Judiciary, the chairman of the LSR, an external member, and the manager of the LSR. Already here, we take an external member into the selection committee because it is, well, the judiciary, of course, is a very big part of society, and we find it very important that it's not only internal, but there's also external members involved. So you will see later on that those external view, we take into account the whole procedure and every selection we do. The members, they are appointed for 3 or 4 years, and all members are trained by our assessment agency. The agency we work together with now is called LTP. We will explain a little more about them later on. Then the National Selection Committee of the Judges, the LSR. As I said, we are responsible for recruitment and selection of judges that go into training at the courts. We don't do that by ourselves. Of course, the courts, they have a say in that as well, but we will explain later on. The composition of the LSR, let me start with that. There's a board. The chairman of the board is supposed to be a president of a court. Now, at this time, it's the president of the Court of Amsterdam. We have a deputy chairman, and the deputy chairman is a president of a court of appeal, now the Hof Arnhem-Leeuwarden, and we have 3 members. I'm one of the members, but I do that together with 2 of my colleagues. We are supposed to come from either a district court or a court of appeal. Next to the board, there are 22 selectors active for the LSR. There are 12 internal selectors. Those are judges. They work in real life, I would say, as a judge in either a district court or a court of appeal. And a few times a year, they do the selection procedure for us. And next to the 12 internal selectors, there are 10 external selectors. And we select them. Those are just members from society. They can have different kinds of jobs, but they have to be an expert on selection procedure. They have to do in their regular job, they have to have experience in selecting people. You can think about, there are lawyers as external selectors active. There are journalists, there are prosecutors, but they can be from different range. They have to have experience with the judiciary, of course, but also with the selection procedure. And then there is the LSR staff. There are 4 employees active there and a manager. And that is Judith next to me, and she will take over now.
As we saw before, the LSR is working together with an assessment agency. We work at the moment together with LTP. It's an assessment agency specialized in the assessment industry for the government. So they work for a lot of other organizations for the government. It's a big agency. They are working more than 120 psychologists. The judiciary uses a tender procedure to find the assessment agency for which we want to work together with. At the moment, we have a contract for 8 years, but it can differ. So now we have still 2 years to go, and then we we write out another tender procedure, and then we can work together with another agency. It's just based on their it's based on their specialism. So we like to try to work together with different agencies to make sure that we optimize our procedure every 4 or 8 years. So now, next year, we start with another evaluation of the whole selection procedure of judges. It's done by a university, also throughout a tender procedure. And it's always a university specialized in social and behavioral sciences. And what we see is the report the university brings us at the end of the evaluation procedure is composed of the results of our data, the data we give them from our selection procedure, but also it's based on the latest scientific research. So we like to combine that together and then try to optimize the procedure for the future. This is how we recruit judges in Holland. We have, as LSR, we open the vacancies nationwide on behalf of all the courts and courts of appeal. So we are like the central administration of it all. We have an employer brand, so we do it like big companies in Holland also do. We recruit judges like this. We just have a new campaign video. So this in the middle, you see a judge working from home. So we also try to show people how the work is done. So we are at the office, but we're also at home. And then the guy on the right for you, he is one of the assistants of a judge. And this picture was taken half a year ago, and he just made a switch to our ICT organization. So it's really nice to see that we use our own employees in our campaign. So this is real, and we try to show the real picture of our organization. So this is our new campaign. We use the campaign to recruit judges, and we have three types of judges. We have the younger group. These are judges with 2 to 6 years work experience. We have the judges with more than 6 years of work experience outside the judiciary. So if you work inside our organization, it doesn't count. You have to go outside and gain work experience at, for instance, a commercial organization, maybe somewhere at another organization in the Dutch government, but not inside the judiciary. And at last we have then the judges in Court of Appeal, and they have to have more than 10 years of work experience outside. No, I think it is her cat though, yes. Okay, then the candidates. What do they need to get starting with the selection procedure? In Holland, we have 3 things. We call it like the formal requirements. For instance, the first thing is you have to be a Dutch citizen. Then the second is you have to study Dutch law. There is a special type of study. You have to have that. So we check that before you can begin. And you have to have at least 2 years of work experience outside the judiciary. So I told you about it. Like if people work inside our organization, we ask them to go and look outside and work at another company before they can apply for a job as a judge. We help them with that, so it's not that you are alone in that situation. Managers are talking to the employees and helping them find another place to work, or thinking with them like which kind of opportunities are outside of our organization, but it's obliged, so you have to have that work experience. And then we have some judicial antecedents we check and diplomas. So that's all at the beginning. If you miss something at some point, then we tell you to come back later. And then we have the job profile for a judge. I think it is in your handout somewhere. They told me. So we described the job of a judge really in detail, but it's all based on those 11 competences. And these are the 11 competences we think a judge should have to succeed in the job, because these are the skills that are expected. That as a candidate has these skills, they will be a condition for success in the job. And you can divide them in 3 categories. We call it strength, thinking, and feeling. So these are the 3 main subjects that are important to have. So these competences are all or strength or thinking, or they have something to do with feeling, to be sensitive about what is happening in court. So these competences are the basis of our selection procedure. All the tests and all the interviews are about those 11 competences. So they are coming back in every step of the procedure.
You might wonder why judicial knowledge is not one of the competences, but we don't consider that as a competence. It's a basis. When you have studied Dutch law, when you are a job expert with at least 2, 6, or 10 years of experience, then the knowledge of the Dutch law is like a basis. We are not going to test that, because later on, when you're active as a judge, a lot of different cases are going to end up on your desk, and we don't expect you at the beginning to know all of them, because every case is different. You should have the skills to be able to deal with that. Not only the judicial skills, but furthermore the competences that Judith just described. The selection procedure, next to the formal competences that were just mentioned and that are a go or no-go into the procedure, we start the selection procedure with a letter selection. Then the analytical tests to measure your intelligence. Your intelligence should be highly academic, so not average, but highly academic. Next to that, there's a local interview where you have to bring references of your former colleagues or director. You have to do an assessment, and at last, there are 3 final interviews with LSR. We are now going to explain each step of the selection procedure to give a little more insight of what we do there. And I start at first with the letter selection. When there are vacancies, people can apply. They have to write of course, a letter, and then next to the letter they write, they have to fill out different kind of forms and put a lot of information into there. So the LSR can test if the formal steps are taken, but then with the selection of the letters, that is done jointly by the president of the court that has the job offer and by a member of the board of LSR. So those 2 together, they get all the information of the candidates that have applied, and they start with reading the letters and looking at the file of the candidate and decide which one can go on in the procedure. For every job vacancy, 5 candidates can go on into the procedure. I mentioned this number here because, as we have already known in earlier procedures, a lot of people fail the different tests that are about to follow. So we don't select one candidate for every vacancy, we select more. That also gives us the opportunity to have something to choose, as you might say. When we do the letter selection, we have a score form, and on that score form you can you have different subjects that you can score a candidate on, like education, the work experience someone has, the activities someone does next to the job. Is someone active for society, for instance? Is he active for a charity foundation or a member of the board of a sports club or something? In the Netherlands, we find that very important. We think it's necessary for a judge to not be, as we say, in an ivory tower, but that he or she is really a member of society and is very active in society, so he or she knows what's going on and how that affects the cases that you have to decide upon. Of course, the motivation is very important. Why is someone applying for the job? And there might be some particularities that you have to mention. When you are active as a lawyer, there might have been a case that a client was unsatisfied about and complained about. Such things we ask you to mention, so we can take that into account. That is the letter selection we do, and then it goes on
with the analytical test. That's not the favorite part of our candidates. I think they find it really hard, but we think it's the best way to test the intelligence of a candidate, and it's really a high predictive value for the whole selection procedure. So all the candidates that go through the letter selection, they have to do the analytical test. And the test, the components of the tests, you can read here behind me. I can tell you a little bit more about every test, but maybe it's good to start with, and Esmee told you already, all the candidates have to have an above average academic level, and that's quite high. So the test is quite difficult. We see that around 30% of our candidates doesn't pass the test, and they have to stop. So it's a knockout in this stage of the procedure. They have to make 3 tests. They do it at home, so it's online, and they can practice for the test. And that they can practice is not that they can learn it by heart, so they can just remember and then make it and then pass. No, because they get different tests, but they know what the questions are, and they know how to solve the questions. So you can rehearse as much as you want. It makes you less stressful at the moment that you're making the test, and you are at your best level. So practicing is what we advise them to do, but it doesn't. It's not that they can learn it by heart. They start with the verbal reasoning test. We think verbal skills are really important during the education of the judge later, if the candidate passes the whole selection procedure. So we think the verbal reasoning is really important. It is also proven by our the last university who evaluated our procedure that the verbal reasoning is really important. It's a test that is showing us your ability to discover a relationship between 2 words and apply that relationship to other words. And you need that in discussions with other people, in writing and in reading. And that's, well, kind of the thing you do as a judge. So then they are making the critical thinking test. That's also a test that's testing your ability and the quality of gaining insight in complex matters, logical reasoning, and distinguishing facts from assumptions. So it's helping you drawing a right conclusion from a kind of complex case or complex problems. And yeah, we want to make sure that people are at a high level on that. And then the third test is the abstract thinking skills test. That's a different test. It's not a verbal test, but it's with figures. So people find it always quite stressful to make it. But it's also a really important one because this is also testing logical reasoning, but also your ability to distinguish between main and secondary issues. So we really see that during the education program of judges, this test says a lot because it helps people during the day to prior their work and to handle stress, because you are quickly in seeing what is the problem here, what do I have to do, what's next. So we see if people fail during our education program, it's a lot of times it has something to do with their abstract thinking. So it's also really important that this is at a high level. So these are the 3 tests we use.
As Judith said, a lot of people fail the test, about 30%. So they have to exit the procedure. With the people that pass, and keep in mind 5 per job vacancy. So when you take off 1/3, you have a little less to choose. The people that pass the analytical test, they go on to the local selection. The local selection is done by the district court or the court of appeal that the candidate will start their education. The courts invite the candidates for an interview, and a selection committee consisting of judges and attendants that work at the court, they have an interview with the candidate, and another interview is with the president of the court and a part of the management board of the court. Within 2 weeks, we try to keep the pace into the procedure, because the candidates, of course, they want to know if they are gonna pass at the end. So we try to keep up the tempo. Within 2 weeks, the courts notify LSR, and they let LSR know which candidate can continue with the procedure. We then have a maximum of 3 candidates per job vacancy, because the tests that are later on and the interviews that are later on show that the chance of passing is higher than with the analytical test. So we don't want to have too many candidates at the end.
Then the next step in the procedure is the assessment center. It's a combination of different tests and interviews. At this stage in the procedure, maybe it's good to tell you that everybody that is in this stage goes to the final interview. So this is quite a relief. If you are here, then you're basically almost there. But this is also quite a long day. The assessment center, it's a whole day at LTP, our assessment agency, and you have to do a lot of tests, and it's quite a busy day. The day starts with a structured interview through a psychologist, and he is taking he's talking with you about a lot of subjects, but the basis for the interviews are the personality questionnaire. So candidates fill in a lot of questions at home about themselves. So we know what kind of personality the person has and what talents he has. So that's quite good, because the psychologist can focus on the things that are important for the job as a judge. We still have the 11 competences I showed you at the beginning, and these are the competences we want to know if they are there and how you score them. Are you really good at it? Maybe you have to develop something, or maybe you're just not so good at it. It's not your talent. That's not a big problem. Everybody has talents and things they are like little bit less good at. But in total, you have to show that you have the 11 competences at a sufficient level to go through. We also have a dilemma test. It's about integrity. Then there's a discussion simulation. It's kind of a computer game. You play a game with all kind of figures, and it's about an hour. It's quite long, and it also tests your all the 11 competences are coming through again. Are you good at making decisions? How do you handling stress? Can you see the problem there? And what are the things you don't have to pay attention to? So the game is a real computer game. And then there's the role play. There's an actor you have to play a role with. So he is playing somebody. It's not a really nice person, or it's quite a different, of course, a difficult person. And you have to react on how he is talking to you or to the situation. And again, we are looking at your stress level and how you react. And yeah, how are you in that situation? It's also kind of stressful for the people. Then at the end of the day, the psychologist is talking to the candidate and telling him his advice. So it's positive or negative, but either way you go through. So either way you go to the final interviews, but you take your whole report with you to the final interviews, and there it's also one of the subjects we talk about with you.
And then there's the day of the final interviews. For the selectors, it's a whole day because they talk to 6 candidates. For the candidates, it's a part of the day, so either morning or afternoon. In the morning or afternoon, each candidate has 3 final interviews with 3 different committees. And we compose the committees of the 12 judges or the 10 external selectors. So there's always 2 people talking to the candidate, 1 judge and 1 external selector together. They have the interview with the candidate, and it's a total of 6 selectors for 1 day. The reason why we do that, why we involve so many people in those final interviews, is because you have 6 people talking to a candidate, which guarantees you the intersubjectivity, and it helps avoid errors in judgment on the candidate.
Yes, so the 3 committees talking to the candidate for the final interviews. We call it a semi-structured interview. And what does that mean? It means that we have the same subjects we discuss with every candidate. They are here, you can read them. So every candidate has the same interview, and we also ask them one question. For everybody, it's the same question. So, for instance, we have a question about balance. Everybody starts with the same question. After that one, the committee can choose which questions they want to ask. It depends on what the situation is and what the answer of the candidate was. But we let them choose. So that's why we call it semi-structured. The committee is trained. We told you in the beginning of this presentation, and we train them in different subjects. Interviewing techniques, we are using the STAR method. Maybe you know it, maybe not. Every candidate has to, we ask them questions, and we want them to tell a situation from the past. They have to give an example of a situation, which was their action and what was the result. And we want to see some reflection at the end. So what did you do and why did you do it? Then we train them in possible risk of bias. So we're always a bit like people we like. We always are easy or more. We like people more who are maybe the same. They look at us, or they have the same hobbies, or they smile all the time, but it doesn't mean you are a good judge. So we explain what are the risks of bias. Then there is the assessment report. It's quite a big report. So we also help them reading that and interpreting that report. And then there's the consensus of the score. So we have a framework on which we use to score all the answers the candidates give during the interview. So we try to score the same. So the answers can be bad, maybe they were outstanding, maybe they were moderate, but we defined all those possibilities, and we try to score candidates like in an equal way. So we use a framework for that.
As Judith explained, we have a semi-structured interview, and that guarantees us a balanced approach to evaluate the candidates you talk to on that day. We have a mandatory question. Judith already explained the STAR method. The reason why we use the STAR method is because there are a lot of researches done that show that behavior in the past is a good predictor for future behavior. So instead of asking, what might you do when this or that file ends up on your desk, or when you in a court hearing see this or that kind of person, we ask somebody, what did somebody do when working as a lawyer he had a certain type of client? That is what we ask. And then the STAR method, you ask, what was the situation? What was your task in that situation? What was the action you took? And what was the result of all that? And as Judith explained, we also want candidates to reflect on their own behavior, because reflection on your own behavior is a good way of predicting how someone will react in case of being a judge, but also in becoming a judge. Because once you finish the procedure, you're going to work as a judge, of course, but you have two people, two trainers. They are experienced judges that help you decide, help you do your court hearings and everything. You start at the court, but then you sit as a judge in the court hearing, but the experienced judge is in the back of the hearing and looking at what you do. And then after the court hearing, you hear what went well and what you should improve. To be able to improve, you have to be able to reflect upon your behavior. So that is why we ask in the STAR method, and why we ask the past behavior. The semi-structured setup allows us to build a connection, of course, with the candidates, to make them feel at ease. They have a safe environment. They know every interview is the same way with the different topics Judith just explained. And we can dig deeper into the responses the candidates give us. And what helps us there is that it makes it more objective. We can have the same approach, so we can have a more objective way of testing the candidates. We have here an example of a question. I'm not going to spell it out. You can read it. But the question, we have the competency, that is the analytical ability and judgment. And then every committee, the two persons in the interview, asks, can you discuss a recent situation where you were faced with a complex issue or had to make a challenging decision? We have the score forms during the interview, so we can take notes. And then at the end, and that is the final step in the procedure, the 6 selectors, they get together at the end of the interview, so that's the end of a long day. And then a member of the board of LSR is present. The board member has not done the interviews, but is there to, again, guarantee the objectivity. The LSR board member acts as a chairman of the procedure when the decision is made if the candidate is going to pass or fail. Candidates that pass get, as we call it, a green light, and they are presented to the courts. And then the courts decide, together with the candidate, when the candidate will start with the education program. And then the education program is partly in the court, and the other part is with SSR. It's our national training center for the judges. This, you might think, will take forever because every step in the procedure. That's not the case. There's a set amount of time, and at the beginning of the selection, the candidates as well as the courts, they know what dates, what tests will be, and when the results will be known, and also the date for the start of the education program is set. So we have set dates every year when the procedure starts and when the education starts. This is the end of our presentation. We gave you a lot of information. I understood that now the presentation of the roadmap will be later on after the coffee break. There will be plenty of room for questions, and maybe even in the coffee break. Thank you.
Dziękujemy bardzo. Myślę, że to było bardzo interesujące. Więcej informacji znajdą Państwo oczywiście w publikacjach LSR, dlatego że...
Thank you so much. That was very interesting indeed. More information is to be found in the publication of LSR, because what is interesting about the work of LSR is that it's so transparent. And the publication, LSR publications, are available not only in Dutch, but also you can find a lot of information in English. So for those of you who are interested in the profile of a judge's role and competences, you can find it in the report that we drew up based on or having studied this system and the history of the Dutch judiciary and based on the discussions with judges from Holland and people involved in the development of the system. We developed this report last year. You have it in your conference materials. It's also available on the website. And at the very end, yes, you have some links and details. So feel free to read it and see what sort of competences are important for Dutch judges and what the Select Committee pays attention to. Now, the last part of the first part of our meeting is a presentation of a new report of Court Watch. It's a publication that we entitled Towards Justice, the roadmap of reform of selection for judges. We wrote this report of competitions for judges. We wrote this report thinking about Poland, but the model itself seems to be quite universal. And I hope that it's going to be useful to people who are interested in the selection system of judges in other countries as well. So the question is, why would we even think about reforming the system for selection of judges in our countries? So this is the question we should ask first. Well, you could interpret this question in many different ways. Because in order to appoint judges in Poland, well, there are different comments about the way the system is arranged. But we want to talk about the future and not about how judges were appointed in the past.
We want to discuss what we will need in the future. So in order to look into the future, we need to diagnose the features of the system, of the model that we have, and how it's going to be used independently to the decisions concerning the use of the model in the future. Let me remind you the model. The model was described in our publication. In the comparison, you can find this comparison between the Dutch and Polish selection system. There's a graph on page 66. This is where you can find the comparison. Our system is basically based on a series of steps involving also local community. However, it's very different from the one that we could see in the Netherlands. This process is not managed by a specialized commission, but rather by a national council of judiciary. And what is the National Council of the Judiciary is facing with? And it involves not all the members. Such members as Minister of Justice or the President of the Supreme Court or Supreme Administrative Court. They do not participate in the works of the Council. So more or less there are around 20 members. And those 20 members, apart from many other duties, they have one objective: to protect the independence of judiciary, independence of judges, to provide also opinion on different acts. They can refer the legal acts to the Constitutional Tribunal, and they also perform the competition, and they perform selection of judges, candidates for judges, because in Poland we don't have pre-selection, so all the candidates need to be evaluated by the National Council of the Judiciary. And there were over 300 competitions. It's a huge number. So theoretically, it's one competition daily. On average, during the last decade, it's around 400 candidates annually presented for the president to appoint. So a huge number of candidates and a huge number of future judges to be appointed by the president. So there's a question, is it realistic that such a council, such a body with so many obligations and duties is able to thoroughly select those candidates? They finally select 400, but of course there are much more candidates. There were over 1,000 candidates last year, and before 2015 it could have been even several thousand candidates annually, so huge number of candidates. Of course, National Council of the Judiciary supports local bodies, because the initial decisions were taken locally, and still the council needs to get familiar with every candidate. How was it evaluated by the judges themselves? And here we have the comparison of the evaluation of the procedure, of the procedure being objective. The judges that participated in the survey of the Association of Judiciary Councils, if you agree with the fact that the judges were promoted in your countries on other basis than just competences and experience, and almost 50% of the judges agreed with that, and it was still before Polish National Council of the Judiciary was expelled from this network, so it was still before the change of the act and composition of the council. So already then the judges had reservations concerning this procedure. So this model, the methods that were used, they did not fulfill their functions even from the perspective of the candidates. We're talking about the judges that were participating in the promotion procedures. They didn't believe the objectivity of this procedure. In comparison with the Netherlands, it doesn't look good. And also it doesn't look good with the average European evaluation. Other countries that have a similar model as the Netherlands, so very specialized commission like Denmark, they have the best result in Europe, even better result than the Netherlands, with even less reservations. And UK, with such a commission as well, they have much better results. So this model seems to be working when this specialized commission is established, and objective methods, it works in the opinion of the judges themselves. Another issue that we can pay attention to, empirical studies. Just an example. Empirical study of Dr. Główczewski from the University of Nicholas Copernicus. He has evaluated the level of knowledge of prosecutors and judges concerning very important area of knowledge, which is psychology of interviews. So the tool of every judge's work. So psychology of interrogation, of interviews, and he has discussed with judges with different seniority, research from 1915, and the conclusions indicate that the analysis of the replies conclude that the judges and the prosecutors have great knowledge gaps which would be necessary in case of any interviews. So we're dealing with the fact that we pay attention to the legal knowledge, legal skills, but in the other areas concerning, for example, knowledge in the area of how to interrogate or how to interview or what kind of mechanisms related to psychology or memory can be impacting their work. So it turned out that many judges believe in hypnosis or graphology, and it turned out that the knowledge of the judges, ladies and gentlemen, is lower than the knowledge of students of the 5th year of legal studies. So the results of this research is really concerning, and it indicates that we have some competence gap, knowledge gap, and it's only one area that seems to be critical for a judge to work, but competences do not only refer to knowledge. In this publication, we also refer to other aspects, so the perspective of management and scientific approach to selection of people, selection of personnel. And we should select people with proper competences. And what the competences are, because we understand competences formally in the understanding of this word as a skill, as knowledge. In this understanding of competences from the perspective of management, especially when it comes to selection, competence is referring to behaviors that are expected from a person that should fulfill specific role in an organization. So these behaviors are connected with fulfilling obligations or duties connected with specific position in the organization. And when it comes to a judge, for example, providing justice, giving decisions. So, for example, decision-making would be such a competence. But if we talk about the competence of decision-making, what is required? The judge needs to have specific knowledge. So, for example, psychology of interviews, of interrogation. So, such a judge needs to know how people recollect or remember things. But it's not sufficient. The judge needs to have the ability to apply this knowledge, because theory is not sufficient. So ability to apply this knowledge. Another element that should be discussed here is the motivation to apply this knowledge, because I'm sure you know many people that do have the knowledge, they can even apply this knowledge, but they just don't feel like applying it or using it. So competences, in fact, include things that we use in practice when necessary. How do we recognize that someone has a competence? We recognize that because someone uses it. We can recognize it from behavior, not only actions, because competence can be negligence of actions, for example. So composure. How do we know that someone can stay composed? Because such person wouldn't, for example, shout when getting irritated. It's a competence as well. It's a behavior. And this behavior is not doing something instead of doing something. And those behaviors in a judge are significant because judges can face situations that can be emotionally challenging, and they need to stay composed. What is significant in case of competences is that they can be measured. They manifest through specific behavior, so they can be measured. So this element of motivation is extremely important here, because the knowledge can be tested. Skills can be tested as well. Show me if you can do that. But it's challenging, it's problematic. To measure something else, because someone might have knowledge, someone might have the skills, but then all this needs to be applied. So the element of motivation becomes critical. So we need to verify if this given person will be using those skills and knowledge in practice. Is this person motivated to perform what is necessary? So it's not enough to learn something by heart. It's insufficient to go through training and get a certificate. So you need to be a human, you need to be a person that proves through actions what is expected, to prove the values that are expected from a judge. So when we look at competences, I think this approach is extremely important in judiciary, because when we recruit an employee, this employee after a while can be, we can find out he has passed the test, maybe had a certificate, but this employee is not using the skills. There's not motivation to use the skills or competences. But if we appoint a judge and the judge won't be using the skills and competences, we will have a problem. There's a great research performed by Professor Morawska and Professor Banasik. Fantastic results concerning how the results of the judges were impacting their future work. The results were very, very good before the appointment. Before the competition, the results were improving and then getting worse after the appointment. That's interesting.
So after the team or the department was changed, after the secretariat was exchanged, were the outcomes equally good? These are interesting questions. Is it just about the circumstances that the outcomes were so good? Maybe it was just the motivation to show the visitor what a great statistics you can generate, or was it real competences showing that I'm motivated? Competences are universal. They manifest themselves in different roles that we take, so we can research them regardless of what we use them for. So we can develop a selection system which is fair vis-à-vis people coming from different backgrounds, and then you can compare. You can compare people who come to us from the court, from a notarial office, from the prosecutor's office, or if someone a legal counsel, because we are not looking at their statistics, how they do deal with things. We don't compare the opinion. We just don't look at a single activity, but we investigate the expected competences that the judge is going to need. And if we prepare the methods, the evaluation method well, evaluation of how the person takes the decision, how calm this person is, how composed. So regardless of where this person acquired these competences and then used them, we are able to compare the level of those competences. Or possibly we can check by means of other methods. For example, psychometric tests different psychological tests to see whether this person is predisposed to develop such competences. So now we are talking about what we need for the system to help us choose the best people out of those who are available. So the best, meaning ones that will play this role best, regardless of their background, regardless of their experience. But they will offer us the biggest benefits in the years to come. Maybe in the short term, it's better to have someone who has some concrete experiences. He was an assistant or someone else because he knows the justice system, the judiciary. But in the long run, maybe it's better to have someone who has the predispositions to have a competence. So this person might not have the experience, but might have some competences for the future. It's better than a person who doesn't have the predisposition to develop this competence, because this is going to be a barrier. Even though this person has experience in court, this person doesn't have the right competence for being a judge and doesn't have predispositions to develop it. So this person will never be a judge we need. So to be able to do that, to be able to identify whether this is the person who will work well as a judge or not, we need methods which are sensitive to those elements. Now we have methods that evaluate qualifications well. They evaluate certain features, such as hard worker, thorough person, reasonable reasoning. But what about competences and that the Dutch system already takes into account? But in Poland, we are still blind when it comes to those competences. Well, here, what could be helpful are the methods developed by psychology and management studies. These are simple these are tests that psychologists have been working with for hundreds of years in the organizations, and they've been testing them on huge databases, because these methods are used in many domains of economy to recruit people on positions where a lot of money are at stake. So a lot of money is invested to make sure that the decisions are right. So the results of these studies are to be grabbed and implemented. The methods can be adapted. And in Poland, we do have specialists that have done that in the past, and they are ready to work on it in the future, I guess. Now, a simplified process looks like this. You need to describe the role and expectations, develop a competence profile, choose the right tools that will be sensitive to those qualities that we are looking for. Then you carry out competitions, and it's done by a specialized committee that will be able to competently use those tools, that will be able to do that, and will be able to do it physically. Well, like I said, a group of lawyers of 20 people who are selected for other reasons, whatever the reasons are, to the National Council of Judiciary. Well, you're not selected there depending on your selection qualities. Totally different things are important here, because the main task of the National Council of the Judiciary is to take care of the independence of judges and not select processes. So it would be good to follow Holland or Denmark or UK and have a specific committee. This committee is in line with the European network of judiciary councils, which for years has been saying that such a committee should have the right competence profile, it should use objective methods, and it would be good if it was composed of people who will not only be judges, but also specialists. Every now and then, it should be evaluated. Evaluation is very important to assess whether we are doing it right. So we had such attempts in Poland, but the conclusions were not really taken into account. So not much was done based on that. Competence profiles were worked out indeed concerning soft competences, but it wasn't really implemented in practice in the National Council of Judiciary. So this is something that a specialized committee could do. They would have time to do this. National Board of Judiciary will not have enough time to do that, to be specialized. So similarly as in Holland, a specialized institution could develop could have enough time for that and be specialized in that. So, and those problems that we are facing, the fact that the National Council of the Judiciary is not efficient, well, a solution would be to implement a specialist committee that would carry out competitions. Criteria are now too general. There are no indicators, and one could develop profiles of expectations and define objective methods of measurements. And there are tools to do that. So a selection is discretional. It's not understandable to candidates. So each member of the National Council of the Judiciary can vote, and they don't have to justify their vote. So unfortunately, this system is very susceptible to errors, and it's above all not understood by people involved in these procedures, because these votes are never justified. The decision is the justification is secondary. So when a selection is based on indicators that are foreseeable and well described, it can help you attract talented people who know what is expected of them, who know what it's all going to be about. So thanks to this, the selection would be much better, much more precise. The map that we developed seems complicated, but in fact, point by point, it describes what you need to remember about consulting the community, consulting the stakeholders, about taking several political, unfortunately, decisions, because certain decisions, certain solutions have to be implemented in the law. So you need to evaluate the system. You need to make sure certain elements are described. Don't forget about it. Just like now, certain things are not described. Competence profile, descriptions of competences have to be in place. But it's really important for them to be prepared together with the lawyers, together with the judicial community, based on research in a professional way. The whole process doesn't have to take too much time, because there are tools to do that. There are people who can do it really well. But it's important to remember about this, to take these steps. And it's important not to impose it top down. That's why we did not prepare a draft law for you. This is just a draft roadmap that you should take in order to develop such a law. Or alternatively, you could make amendments in the regulations, of course, if it's impossible to implement this by way of a law, but it would be a suboptimal solution. We think that it would be much more reasonable to implement changes in the form of a law, which would give this new model the right degree of importance, where the committee would be a specialized committee and it could take the decisions based on objective criteria and present their conclusions to the National Council of Judiciary. Thanks to that, the choice would be in the hands of specialists, while the National Council of the Judiciary could spend its attention and time on the tasks that the Constitution is talking about. This model concerns the solution, and it's a general model. Details can be adapted to the Polish needs and the Polish conditions, but the most important modus operandi, MO, is the goal. And the goal, let me just quote. It's why high legitimization of people who are appointed as judges in the light of law, but also in the eyes of the general public. I think this is something that we really need. It's the choice of people who are best matched in terms of qualities, predispositions, and motivations to have this role. It's about attracting sufficient number of candidates to be able to appoint all vacancies with people who meet the highest requirements. It's about minimizing the risk of appointing judges who do not have the right predispositions, motivations, and qualities. If we follow this goal, I think we will all agree as to the methods that we should use for this purpose. Thank you for your attention. We'll have a coffee break now. And ladies and gentlemen, let me suggest a model of the discussion where you will be invited to take the floor. I would like our guests to answer your questions. I already have several people who wanted to share their thoughts and ask questions to our guests. So if you know now you want to take the floor, approach me. I'll put you on the list.
I have 10 persons to ask questions, so I will ask you one by one to the podium to ask questions so everyone could hear you, also the interpreters. So the first person to ask the question is the judge Jan Grzęta, Chief Administrative Court. He used to be the member of the National Council of the Judiciary. So the judge, thank you very much for coming. And the next person would be the Dean, Professor Tomasz Szefler from the National Council of the Legal Advisors and the Dean of the Chamber of Legal Advisors. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thanks for giving me the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, brief question. I look at the chart at page 26, and from my experience, I've been working in judiciary for 46 years. This system on the left, which is in green on page 26, in the 90s, when we changed this system from the previous one to a new one, we were convinced that the judges in the framework of self-government be able to eliminate the ones that should not become judges, and it didn't work. It failed. The ones working in the courts know very well that this model failed because the judges didn't eliminate themselves. I can show you honestly that at least 2 members of National Council of the Judiciary, I didn't recommend for them to become judges, and now they are members of the National Council of the Judiciary. At least 2 judges. And there was a moment that we needed to send them somewhere else, and they were not eliminated. When it comes to our colleagues, when it comes to asking questions to our colleagues from the Netherlands, because the model that you have presented, I like it. It's a great model. There's a procedure for recruitment, and I wanted to ask if it's just a recruitment or also it's the same procedure for promotion. because in Poland, when we change from one court to another, to second instance, do you perform the same procedure also for promotion, or just for the first time when someone wants to become a judge? Because I think if we had this network, this procedure for the first selection, that would be great. And there's a technical issue, because what we have with the National Court of the Judiciary, well, we don't have the council at all, but when we had the normal National Council of the Judiciary, it was more formal, and the interview and verification of the candidate did not take place in Poland. When it comes to the council, we needed to rely on the self-government of the judges. In the majority of cases, the Council of the Judiciary, when we assessed and selected the candidates, we relied on how it looked like from the perspective of the self-government. So we would evaluate his or her work when it was a promotion, or other data if they have applied for the first time to become judges. The element of the assessment, if, for example, this person can behave in specific situation, keep composure, stress resistance, and so on and so forth, it was possible on the experience of given person, but only in case of promotion. However, currently, the constitution cannot be changed. So you have suggested this commission that would evaluate all those issues that you have presented at the end of your presentation. Would it be a compulsory body? But I think the initial assessment is necessary, because as we see right now, some people should not have became judges. They were not selected. So in practice, we have consequences, and we need to suffer the consequences right now. And what we can see right now in this so-called council, I think that's the consequence. I think if some of those people would go through the procedure that colleagues from Netherlands described, they would never become judges to start with. So those people should not have become judges. My question is, you described the first selection when someone becomes a judge for the first time, or you perform this selection procedure at every stage whenever you perform promotion. So if someone is recruited to the first instance, they need to go through this procedure, or this procedure needs to be performed each time in case of promotion. So if someone comes from outside, they need to start with first instance. So this person is already evaluated, and then we just refer to your experience. So this is my question. And I would like to thank the judge from the Netherlands for your input. Thank you so much. The next person is the Dean, Professor Scheffler, and the next person would be Judge Owczarewicz from the Association of Judges for Mediation, the Dean, Tomasz Scheffler. Before I ask my questions, I wanted to refer to what Ambassador said, these relations of Poland and the Netherlands. She noticed, and Poland had the first constitution, and it was in the Henry article. So she noticed that we had some elements of shaping the structure of division of power. It was very modern for those times, for the 16th century. Even Grotius was also fascinated by this Polish solution, so it's worth one mentioning. The model that you have presented, the model from the Netherlands, has very interesting elements. I think it's worth considering. I'm not sure if it can be implemented in Poland, but you've mentioned, the colleagues from the Netherlands mentioned several elements that I find extremely interesting. That if you want to become a judge, you need to have experience. And I think it's critical. The judges in Poland, they are under someone's supervision. First they have families, then maybe they might work somewhere during the university career, and then they suddenly go to the course, and then they become officials. So there's no experience from outside of judiciary. They don't have the understanding of what is happening to people. They don't have the understanding of the reality that they are then supposed to refer to. So I think this element of experience and life experience that is necessary to become a judge. Very interesting element concerning competences. These psychological interviews, personality tests, very interesting. From what I remember, it's a total different way of evaluation because this is objective. I'm not sure, it's hard to say if it's 100% objective, but I understand this is the intention. So placing the underlining the skills and abilities to adjust to reality, because that's the point, that we need to have this ability to think logically and also have the ability the skill of abstract thinking. This is so important, especially when we need to refer to the changing legal environment. So you need to learn and keep up to the changes all the time. Ability to maneuver among those provisions. It's not just learning by heart. It's all different. So it's not about learning the provisions or the legal text by heart. So here we focus on not only knowing the provisions, but seeing how this specific person would operate in the society, because the law is for people. And from this perspective, the element that was so crucial in the aspect of the recruitment in the Netherlands, I find it so interesting, and I'm really curious how it can be implemented in Poland as well. Another interesting issue, the impact of the social factor. Let's note that every power that tries to control the judiciary becomes a tyranny. We need to remember about the division of power, and once again, I would like to underline that this element is necessary. So this social element in appointing someone to become a judge, I think it's important, and I think we should have this element as well, this external element. One more thing. I don't think it was mentioned, but from what I know, because I talked with you before, in the Netherlands, a judge from the very beginning needs to have at least 2 specialties, 2 fields of expertise in law. And once again, practice, experience. I'm a lawyer myself. The experts in penal law act differently. The ones that are experts in civil law act differently. So when there's a confrontation of those 2 systems, I'm not even talking about the ones dealing with administration, because it's a different story. And this division scores that law is not a system anymore. It's divided into those small autonomous areas. It's not a way to follow. So the necessity of functioning in different spheres is a good solution, and I think it could be helpful to understand all the legal phenomena. Let's get to my question in the end, because I haven't asked the question yet. So let me ask it. In the system that you described, it is based mostly on the assessment, evaluation. I know there are tests, objective tests, but can a given person... So the test is if such a person, if a candidate, can fulfill the function of being a judge. Maybe so in the consequence, maybe the members of the commission will search for people that are just like them or think like them. So what is the percentage of people that go through the selection procedure? What is the percentage of candidates that pass? And then what is the percentage of being Dutch, so someone who who spoke Dutch from birth? And what is the percentage of people that became citizens of the Netherlands, that come from different or other cultures? Do they actually need to understand the culture very well? So what's the difference between those two groups? Thank you so much. Let me allow the answers after 5 questions, and if you will have any additional questions, we will follow. After Agnieszka Owczarewicz, I will ask Professor Przemysław Banasik, and the next person is Judge Jacek Czaja. Judge that represents the European Association of Judges for Mediation. First of all, briefly, I would like to thank, and then the reflection, and then 2 questions. So first of all, I would like to thank the colleagues from the Netherlands that they have been providing to us for years. Here we have 2 ladies that launched this project in 2010, if I remember well, and the Dutch courts help us to build this new model of management. So thank you so much for what you've been doing for us when we had a great problem with the rule of law. In the name of Polish judges, I would like to thank the Court Watch for their function, because you have let us know that we are in trouble. There is a specific song about someone traveling on a bus with a leaf in his hair and no one would tell him. So thank you very much for telling us that we have a leaf in our hair. As the Polish section of the European Association of Judges for Mediation, I wanted to say that we see these gaps in competences. That is why we are trying to include great mediators and lawyers, advocates that are trying to cover those competence gaps, especially those soft skills, and legal advisors, of course. I'm sorry, I forgot about advisors. That's all stress. So we are getting trained, but that's not sufficient. That's why I have my first question to you. From what I've read, the model that you have in the Netherlands, the model of selection, was introduced in 2015. Do you see differences between the functioning of judges hired before 2015 and after 2015? So difference after the procedure of selection was implemented. And the second question, Are the Dutch courts using artificial intelligence already? Are you having some research, or are you planning to change the model of recruitment of judges to contradict any threats? Do you diagnose everything? Are you trying to reform anything with connection to AI? Professor, the floor is yours. Professor is also a judge of the appeal court in Gdańsk. He was the president of district court in Gdańsk. Let me raise the mic because I need it higher. And he's also a professor of management. So he represents the academia during this conference. Good morning. Thank you so much, President, for the invitation. I wanted to share some reflections, some thoughts, because I had a chance to talk to both guests from the Netherlands already. So I got some clarifications, and I pretty well know the Dutch judiciary. I know how Dutch judiciary is managed. I have wrote several articles about management in judiciary, including judiciary in the Netherlands. I think the main point of this meeting is what happened in Poland after 2016. The disaster that we have had after the deform of judiciary in Poland, and also the devaluation of the position of a judge. We might say that it's been devaluated in every aspect. It's not only about judges' selection or how those people are being promoted or appointed. I'm afraid that implementation of the Dutch criteria of judge selection would cause a shock of our judiciary system, because we are not ready. We wouldn't be able to provide such people to even pass through such selection process. You had this experience in the Netherlands for years. So I think that that would be a revolution instead of evolution of our judiciary system when it comes to judges selection. However, I would be against implementing solutions from other systems copy-paste, because we could create hybrids that wouldn't be able to function well in other reality. I've been working in the judiciary system for more than 25 years from the very beginning, and I'm afraid that our judiciary has so many problems and challenges. This is not only the selection of judges. We have so many problems from the start, from selection of the assistants, of the officials that do not fulfill their roles, courts management to guarantee the basic needs even of judges functioning. We don't have the offices even like in the Netherlands. The judge is doing everything. He receives the office and even sends the letters, including the appeal court. So there are no resources. This is not right. I would really like judges to have not only resources support, or I would like judges in Poland to have the ability to get trained in every aspect, because that's the point. I really love the fact that in the framework of this system of verification of judges, you don't test knowledge, because you can assume that they already have the knowledge of the law if they want to work in court, right? I would very much want the candidates coming to court to have also so-called soft skills, because this is something that we're missing. I remember that in 2014, when I was the president of the district court, I checked the soft skills of media management in my court. No one had skills to be an office manager. From the tests, no one was able to work there. I would need to fire 40 people from one day to another because no one had the skills. Of course, we implemented training of soft skills through different trainings. But no one is supporting those trainings. No one is assisting them. No one sees the problem. So we have the problem from the scratch. So, what happens if we just increase the competences of the judges? Because we have 10,000 of judges and 100,000 of people that are supposed to support the judges. So it's not just the judges. That's everyone working in the judiciary system. We need to include the system of promotion of judges, of specializing the judges. Our system of selection is not working either. The judges should specialize, like doctors, for example. Doctors have specialization of first, second, and third level. The whole life we specialize in some things, and it should be the same in judges. So it's just a reflection. It's just a thought. It's just a general thought because we don't have time for discussion about details. I really like the Dutch system. Congratulations on achieving this level when the society is able to trust the judiciary system. Our system has been destroyed by politicians that were always trying to take advantage of the judiciary system. They are using the judiciary as the weapon. Every 4 years we have elections or self-government elections. We have elections all the time, and everyone is trying to use the judiciary as an element. They want to reform the judiciary. There's no change between one reform and another. I think that 10 years it was better. Now it's 20 years back, behind the proper management. So we're going backwards, not forward. It's not just a selection, but of course I agree that we need to rethink the way that we select the judges and what criteria should be important when we decide who should be a judge in Poland and what factors need to be taken under consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When we organize a conference about the reform of the whole judiciary system, we will invite you, Professor. Now, Judge of the Wojewódzki Court of Administration in Lublin, Mr. Jacek Czaja. The judge was Deputy Minister of Justice, and he was dealing with those topics, so he has a vast experience. So thank you so much, Judge, for having accepted the invitation, and I'm glad that you are going to sum up this part. Well, thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much for this invitation. I will try to formulate a question, which is not so easy today. I remember a study visit in 2010 in Holland. And this was with some judges present here from the National School of Judiciary. And we were discussing the model for court management, model for promotion of judges, a model of appointment. And my question is aimed at finding out what are the reasons and the foundations behind the reform in the Netherlands that took place after that study visit. Because in 2013, you changed the model of court management as well as the rules for appointment. Where did the impulse come from for the changes? Was it preceded by some pressure inside the judges' community, or did it come from outside, from politics? What about the judges' community? How did they see those changes? Did they support the reforms? Or was there a problem with communication? So was the environment friendly towards this idea? Having asked this question, I'm referring to something that happened to us in Poland. Judge Grzenda was talking about the experiences of the National Council of the Judiciary, but I've been equally long a judge, and we had a romantic vision of National Council of the Judiciary when it was established and founded. But now we know that it did not function the way we wanted ever. And I'm not assessing the current model, because the current National Council of the Judiciary, for some basic reason, unjustified appointment of its members, and so it is now not a reference point. But I'm actually talking about the previous period before that. So any attempts at finding out what were the negative sides of the system, negative sides of promotion or appointment of judges. Well, we had some small successes. There were some proposals from the community to, for example, implement a competition committee at the National Council of the Judiciary. This was a draft. This was a project in 2010, submitted by the Senate. So a bill submitted by the Senate. In 2011, it adopted the current act on the National Council of the Judiciary. But back then, the community of judges that cooperate with the National Council of the Judiciary were against creating such a competition committee, because they decided it would be like switching the role and pushing the constitutional representative role of courts to the margin. So pushing to the margin of the National Council of the Judiciary. They said that such a competition committee would be National Council of the Judiciary bis. So we were trying to develop a platform, a common platform. We are trying to develop a common platform, a foundation for such reforms in Poland. So that's why I asked about the attitude of judges in the Netherlands, how they saw the reforms back then. Also, in 2011, we adopted rules on evaluation of judges, and the situation was similar. People didn't welcome it nicely, with understanding, and politics quickly withdrew from these changes after 5 years only. Evaluation of judges was withdrawn. Now it turns out that maybe it was the only element that is the foundation to raise your qualifications while you're a judge is thinking about promotion. So simply replacing a system where there's just a competition upon the entry into this profession, but there are no evaluation instruments in the course of the profession, this is not a good model. So my question is about evaluation in the Netherlands. What does it look like at present? I remember your regulations from the previous years, but today I don't know whether anything changed, whether you evaluate. I assume yes. And does it have any impact on the further career of a judge? Thank you so much, Judge, for your interesting questions. And now I will give the floor to our guests to respond to those questions. And the first person in the next round of questions will be the representative of a non-judge community. So Council Dźwigała will be next person to ask and share thoughts.
Well, let's try to answer the very not easy questions at all. Many questions, little time, so I will try to put some of them together. I first start with the first question. That was about the promotion and the selection procedure when you change courts. And that goes a little bit with the last question we got, so I try to put it a little bit together and explain how we do that. First of all, it's obligatory to explain that once you made a selection to become a judge in training, you're not a judge. Depending on your experience before becoming a judge in training, that is at least 2 or 6 or 10 years, you get an education program in the courts. That education program takes at least 2 years or a maximum of 4 years. In those years, you're trained by 2 experienced judges with at least about 5 or 6 years of experience as a judge. And in those years, you have at least 2 moments of evaluation. And those moments of evaluation can be positive, which means you can go on with your education to become a judge, or can be negative. And then the court president decides to end your education. So then you made a selection, but you're not going to become a judge. So the education program in the court is really, another step to become a judge. It's really necessary that you take 2 positive evaluations before you're going to be appointed. And then once you made that, so first you make the selection, then you make the education of 2 or 4 years, then you're going to become a judge. There's a promotion either to a court of appeal or a promotion in the court from becoming a regular judge, I would say, to become a senior judge. There is no selection involved there. You have to apply to a job offer. Like, for instance, there's a shortage of judges in a court of appeal. Then there's a vacancy. And when you're a regular judge at a district court, you can apply to that vacancy. And the procedure is then that you have a local procedure, like the one we mentioned in our presentation earlier. You have 2 interviews, one with the board of the Court of Appeal and one with some judges that work at the Court of Appeal. It's the same when you're working in the district court and you want to become a senior judge. There's no separate selection procedure. The procedure is local and is an interview with the board of the district court and with the judges who are your colleagues, in fact, at that moment. So there's no national selection procedure. It's only local. When you work as a judge, you have a yearly meeting with the president of your court, and you discuss about how it's going, what training you might need, what skills you might have to develop, etc. But the permanent education is part of being a judge. We have to do at least 30 hours of education every year. We have our national training center where we can do that education, but also we can go to, I heard the name of Grootjes just coming by. It's still a training center at the University of Nijmegen that is called Grootjes. And you can go as a judge, you can get your education at the universities as well, but you have to do at least 30 hours a year. I already talked a lot. Maybe Judith can say some more about this or some other question.
I think this one is, yes, it's okay. I think I...
pronounce Grotius in the Latin way. We don't necessarily understand about whom you are talking about. I believe it's about Hugo Grotius.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Let me go further to the questions about, as I remembered, maybe I did it well, about the how many of our judges are judges with a non-European background. I think That was the question. I don't know the percentages exactly, but it's not really high percentages. So it's quite low, and we try to get more judges with a non-European background. What we do know is that we told you about our intelligence test at the beginning of the procedure. What we know is that the people with a non-European background, they find it really hard to pass the verbal test, and they have to pass the test. So what do we do then? We did beginning of this year, we had a lot of meetings with our assessment agency. We tried to find out what we can do about that test. Should we skip the test? Should we lower the score? We tried a lot of things, but we didn't find a good solution, because we want, and we know it's really important to have a high level of verbal reasoning to pass the education. And as Esmee said, if you fail during your education, you don't become a judge. So for now, we leave it the way it is. So the conclusion is that people with a non-European background pass the test less often than the Dutch candidates. But we're thinking about, and that's something for the future, and I hope maybe the university that's going to evaluate us will say the same, is that maybe we are going to decide to not see the intelligence test as a knockout anymore. So you have to make the test, and the results, we take them to the assessment center in that phase of the selection procedure where you're going to evaluate your procedure as a whole. So it's not a knockout anymore. So you can go through to the local selection. Maybe this is a solution, so we're not sure, and it's not, it is quite hard to find a solution on this point.
Another question was about the fields of expertise. It is true, when you go into training to become a judge, it takes 2 to 4 years, as I just explained, and you have 2 fields of expertise where you are trained. It's either administrative and civil law, or criminal law and civil law. There are different kind of combinations that you can choose. And then after you finish the training, you're gonna be a judge every few years in those fields of expertise. It is well, we find it necessary that you move after a few years to that other field to keep having an open mind. And it's also because you have to keep training yourself, you have to keep learning. Especially in some district courts, you meet the same lawyers every time. So it's good to have other people around that show you where you can still learn and what you need to do. So that's why we change every few years. So we do not have the specialization like doctors might have. We keep it to 2 fields of expertise. So that's a kind of specialization, but not further, unless you go to a court of appeal or like a Supreme Court, or they are more specialized. In the district courts, you have the 2 fields of expertise. That's your specialization. And what we work with as well is that are judges that are not with the courts, but they are working as a lawyer or at the university, and we can put them in a court panel. So they might have the expertise you need in a certain case. Before they can become a judge attending, they have to do a selection procedure as well. So that is the way that we try to get the expertise in a panel when you have a very specialized case. But especially at the district courts, the specialized cases are, well, they're very few. most of the cases are ongoing concern, I might say. What we see in the Netherlands is that in one of the questions and reactions was the way the people in the Netherlands, how they score our judiciary, and the trust of the people in the Netherlands in the Dutch judiciary is very high. It scores year-long about 95–97%. So that's really high. But what we notice is that it's not an easy possession, I would say, that high trust, because you see that because of the politics changing, that we have to be aware of the risks. And what we see is, depending on the politics, is that they try, for instance, to comment on a specific decision of judges. So the judiciary in the Netherlands has to be aware of the risks and has to keep in constant discussion, I would say, with the politics. That in the Trias Politica everybody has their own responsibility, and what we see is that it's individual politicians that comment, for instance, on the way judges decide or the way they work, but there's no influence of the ministry on our work. And that's what we are very aware of, and we're very keen on keeping it that way. There was also a question about artificial intelligence. We do not work with that yet, but our Council of the Judiciary is planning on an experiment, a research, how we can benefit from that. Because the cases that are ongoing concern and which we have very many files of, artificial intelligence, we might benefit from that there. So that's why the Council of the Judiciary is trying to see how that's going to be done. So we're trying. We're not using it yet, but we're going to try. But in the Netherlands, the way we work, we already have a great benefit from the attendance in the court. As I said earlier, every judge has about 2 people that are trained, that are university scholars, that work for them, that help you prepare the case, help you write the case. For a judge, the main part of our job is to do the court hearings and to take the decisions. But in the preparation and afterwards in writing down the decision, we have a lot of help, and we need that help. Yes.
Thank you so much for your answers. We don't have much time left, but I think it would be great to continue with this discussion. So I will not answer the questions because all the replies are in the report. I encourage you to read it, and let me pass the floor to next people. There was an incredible history. The legal advisor gave up his question to an advocate. Another person asking the question is Judge Anata Czaprawska. Please be very brief because we don't have time. My name is Esmee Heuts. I'm an advocate for 32 years. And I assure you that you'll be treated as judges and with respect. For me, the most important issue is what we should achieve in the very end. So how to get to the evaluation of the work of judges to be as objective as possible. I'm a student of Daniel Kahneman and all those analysts of decision-making that describe this reform of the 70s. I don't know how to do it, but I know that in case of penal code, the only point of reference is the average of adjudication. I don't know how to do it in civil cases. And I don't think Kahneman knew how to do it. But I think we need to leave statistics behind. It's not the only criterion. As a participant of judiciary, I think it's the basic criterion. And I think we should depart from this criterion. However, I have one obsession. I think it's an obsession, and it should be deemed as an obsession. But this is the question. In the selection process, we have this external selector. And my question is, who is the external selector? Because I would like to have advocates to be the external selectors, to participate in the process of selection of judges, maybe advocates or legal advisors, so people with experience in application of law. The problem is, of course, in Polish courts. Judge from Gdańsk said it, mentioned many problems, but I think from the perspective of application of law, I think the main problem is what once Tomasz Wartyński called as a semantic interpretation of law. This is impacting all of us, but it's very visible in the court. The provision of law decides about everything, but in legal education, it's dramatic. I had several people in my legal office that decided to become judges. Those were the best students. There's this syndrome of perfectionism. So these are the people that know the provisions by heart, and the all intellectual power is applied to learning by heart. And in Poland, like in everywhere in Europe, we are leaving the codes behind. We are living in common law somehow. Even European law is becoming common law because all those directives are based on the activity of the European Court of Justice. I've asked a question about those external selectors. This is my question. I wanted to say also that I totally agree that implementation of those changes from one day to another would explode our system, would blow it out, because those judges in courts of appeal wouldn't be able to understand even those judges that would go through this selection. So it needs to be step by step. But I'm totally convinced that declaring such a system would support very much the reform of the judiciary and trust of the society in judiciary. And becoming independent again. But I would like to assure you, you don't believe that if we would go back to 2015, it would be okay. It wouldn't be okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Council, Judge from the District Court in Poznań, and experts of the National School of Judges and Prosecutors, and member of Themis and Justiti Association. She's also in Themis Association right now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for invitation. I would like to thank you, ladies, for this fascinating and very interesting lecture that gave me some optimism that there are judiciaries that can define clearly who the judge should be, because I think this is the element that we should rely on, and I think it was clear in all your statements. Personally, I think, and I might be against this pessimism that was resonating in this room, I think that in judiciary, I think there are many people that really desire to improve the functioning of the judiciary. Those people have, for example, co-organized the pilot program of modern management. These were 60 courts that were very much interested in analysis of all the defects of functioning, starting with the issue of contacts with all the stakeholders. And I think that in this pilot project, we have implemented the basis of definitions of the competence models. However, unfortunately, this was provoking great resistance in the community of judges. All those criteria of evaluation of judges and methods and techniques of the evaluation were provoking fear and resistance. And now my question, how can we convince the judges to undergo such system of selection? We are at this stage right now when, in fact, the promotion politics is upside down, and we need to organizing from the scratch. And also the issue of selection is chaotic. It went down to, when it comes to nomination, it's just a selection of from the candidates from the National School of Judges and Prosecutors. So that's the main source of candidates. So in consequence, the issue of opening of the profession, which has always been difficult to accept, what has translated also to the results of the competition, because generally the candidates from outside of the corporation, especially to the courts, were not accepted willingly. I agree with some criticism of advocates and legal advisors that those competitions did not fulfill their role because there was no one criterion of being objective. Our community has this sin of not being objective. We are currently at the stage that continuation of this project of inclusion of the Polish judiciary into the mainstream of reforms and changes that they need to follow because of the technology that was just mentioned, as well as because of the level of complexity of law and economy and the world in general. And on one hand, I would like to say that the judges are open, but on the other hand, I would like to ask you, what is your perception of supporting Polish judges and judiciary in those necessary changes that need to take place? Thank you so much. I have several people on the list, but I think we can get to the end and then sum up. And now, Judge Przemysław Jadłowski, representative of graduate of the National School of Judges and Prosecutors. And the next person to ask a question is President Droczejko. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for the possibility to take the floor in this place. I wanted to share my thought, because while analyzing the Dutch system, we come to a conclusion that it's a system for recruitment for the position of judges, if we understand what's in the very end. So the person selected in this procedure becomes something that we can define someone between assessor and a judge. So we select people that are going to become judges, not the judges themselves. So my first question to you is that I understand well that this system assumes that the person that through this selection receives the positive opinion, a positive decision, starts the judicial training, and then this person adjudicates, but at the same time has the support of the senior judges, or this person just gets trained and is not adjudicating. So how does it look like? However, what I wanted to underline is the fact that despite the fact that this system is so complex, that this system anticipates so many criteria that needs to be taken into consideration, despite all this, the system perceives the possibility of mistake, because the assumption is that the person that goes through all the stages of the procedure becomes judicial trainee and can, based on the evaluation of work and training, receive lifelong judge position. If we compare it with the system that we have, and that's the opinion of the National Judiciary Council, and before 2017, it was always based on a supervisor. So in the council, they don't have the tools to analyze every candidate, right? So based on this criteria, we just believe this person until the end of their life. We don't know if this person will work well as a judge. So in my opinion, this competitive procedure, selection procedure, is a great solution under condition that the system will anticipate a mistake. That is why, in my opinion, the assessor system is a system. It's a system that allows to eliminate the problem, because it's better to allow someone to adjudicate for 4 years as a result of a mistake than allow this person to adjudicate for 40 years. So maybe the Dutch procedure should become the procedure for application to become a judge or even associate judge, to select candidates for the training in anybody, doesn't matter how is it called, and then having those candidates and their personality profile, we can train judges in soft and hard skills. From my own experience, I can tell you that the graduates of the National School are very good lawyers. However, those people quite often, those people work in different districts of Warsaw and don't have the skills to manage such big departments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A very interesting perspective indeed. And now over to the next person. My list is at the very end, but the next person who still wanted to ask questions was Madam Justice Bittner and Piotr Krzak, counsel. Did I bypass anyone? Was there anyone who still wanted to ask a question and I bypassed them? No, okay then. So now please remember that you still want to ask the questions. We will end with that, and then we will give our guests some time to sum up the conference, and I'll take the floor at the very end then, and we'll wrap up. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your kind invitation, and I'd like to share a reflection. When I received an invitation, my first thought was better late than never. And that's because the problem of promoting judges, well, I've dealt with it already in 2012. And as a result of my research, I wrote an article, Criteria of Promotion in Judiciary. I decided that this was a very important topic, so I thought it's worthwhile participating in this conference. However, recent events in Poland have shaken, well, myself, and I started thinking in real terms whether it really makes sense to come here at all. As you will know, on the 13th of December 2023, the Minister of Justice issued instructions for judges how to adjudicate, what to do. What's more, at present, regulation is being proceeded, which is supposed to change the systemic rules in Poland, change the hierarchy of the sources of law. And in this regulation, the minister instructs judges how to adjudicate on concrete matters and what they are supposed to take into account. Another event that took place recently was a situation from the Court of Appeal in the city of Poznań, where a group of people, a group of judges, entered by force to the office of the president. Well, there are different accounts of the situation, but there is this accusation that it was aggressive entry, that the judge was blackmailed, not the judge, but the president of the court was blackmailed, that unless he withdraws, then he will be hated in the press. Well, in spite of all that, or because of all that, I was thinking whether it's worthwhile to come here at all, because if things develop like that in the future, if we keep talking about this like that, then talking about promotion criteria, talking about selection of people to court will be in the background. And in the next 20 years, we won't be dealing with that at all, because each next political team that comes in, they will take revenge on the previous team. So that's my doubts. But nevertheless, I decided to come according to the rule. Do what you're supposed to do, maybe you will be successful, who knows, as the Polish singer was singing. Well, we talked a lot about selection into the service, so I'll bypass this topic because a lot of people have already commented, but I myself focused on it in my research, in my studies. I focused on the criteria of promotion, so moving to courts of higher instance. So how come I decided to deal with this topic? Well, there were two issues. First, I participated in different competitions, and I did see how the National Council of the Judiciary works and what things look like in practice. So not what they look like on paper, but in practice, because on paper, the National Council of the Judiciary was supposed to choose the best. I'm not saying each competition I was involved in, that I'm not saying I would win all of them, but I can say with full conviction, none was carried out fairly. It looked more or less like this. One would always choose criteria where that candidate had the best, the candidate that was supposed to be selected. I don't know what it looked like in all districts. I'm speaking on the example of the city of Krakow. The procedure was as follows. The president of the court would choose a person. Of course, there was no competition, so he chose the person for the so-called ministerial delegation. The minister was submitted with the single right candidate. The minister didn't know whether there was anybody else, what were the judges like, from whom he could choose person to be delegated. Well, it was done by the president in his letter that was 1 or half a page long. That was the candidate's characteristics. And then when the judges were elected, what were the main criteria? Whether a given judge was delegated or not. Well, a judge did not have the possibility of applying for such a delegation by himself. He didn't even know that there were some vacancies for that it was even considered to be that one can be delegated. So already then, the sole right candidate was selected. So criteria were adapted to the candidate to make sure the right candidate wins. And let me tell you what it looked like with the courts of appeal, because in the Voivodeship Court of Appeal, this is where I also applied. I was accused that I did not have administrative experience. And in a way, maybe it was right. I didn't have this experience. But the problem is that in the same competition in which I was involved, they selected other judges which did not have administrative experience. So I asked the National Council of the Judiciary to inform me publicly about the characteristics of all judges, and this was 2010, I think, all judges who were appointed to the position of the of the judge in the Voivodeship Court of Appeal. And I was sent 18 descriptions of 18 people, and only 3 of them had any experience, any administrative experience. Now, the second issue, well, I thought maybe it's not possible to create objective criteria for judges. But back then, there was a Chopin competition, and I looked into the rules of the Chopin competition, and I was hugely surprised to see that this area of art can have some rules. I'm not saying these rules are perfect, but it was much more fair, much more clear, much more transparent than the procedures for promoting judges. I wrote the article, like I said, and I don't know what the culture is, what the things look like in the Netherlands, but I am convinced that in Poland, over the next 20 years, it's impossible to create a different system except for one that is based on the most objective criteria. Well, I'm not going to describe the criteria in detail because the time of the conference is up, but I just wanted to say that my opinion is that it's best to have a seniority, experience, professional experience, notes from your studies, how efficient you are in your proceeding. None of these criteria can be dominant. And one of the gentlemen mentioned that you cannot look at how many decisions were then repealed, but you shouldn't deviate too much from the average. Our Polish system for selection of judges is based on the criterion of evaluation. So if we are selecting candidates to the National School of Judiciary, you have to pass the exam. The note is important, then you pass the exam for a judge. So the questions are only addressed or only apply to the law. But to understand why this is the case, you need to consider what things were like before. So you need to look at it from the point of view of experiences of other corporations. When I started my career as a lawyer, and I started in 1995, for example, advocates, there were advocate committees, and the questions were not about the law. And it turned out that to become an advocate, people who were selected were not the ones who knew the procedures or the law, but the ones who knew where Jim Morrison was buried. That was the criterion to be selected as advocate. So I think selection and the pressure that we only want to focus on exam-based criteria, scores, applicable, related to our legal knowledge. I think it is a result, maybe not only, but a result of that. Please arrive at the end. Ad rem, please. Well, this was important information that about the roots of the current system. So, generally speaking, I don't like when someone talks about concrete people. And one of the gentlemen said that he was involved in the selection of a judge or two judges who are now members of the National Council of the Judiciary. And it seems that he didn't feel comfortable about it. Well, I don't know whether former members of the National Council of the Judiciary felt comfortable when they nominated a judge who didn't behave properly, who broke in, for example, to someone else's office. So at the very end, I still have a question, and I would like to ask a question. So whether at any stage of your procedure that you were describing, is there a possibility to appeal to court? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to supplement this perspective and personal insight of yours, Judge Bittner, all right? Now the Judge Bittner and Counsel Piotr Krzak.
Ale już bez serca. A Morrison w całości. Ale ten sam cmentarz.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, President, for this conference. It was very much needed. It's so important, so critical, especially now, when everyone starts to hope that we can do something constructively, shortly. And I think we need some years to examine and analyze all the possibilities of how we can improve recruitment to courts. I cannot deny myself to say something else. I'm a judge of the district court. I received nomination in 2012. I was never delegated somewhere else, and the delegation was given to me after I participated in the competition. So those delegations were not compulsory. It was easier, but maybe it was not a decisive criterion. However, we have a problem with trust to the courts. And I really envy when you talk about trust in the Netherlands, when you talk that the trust to courts and judges in the Netherlands is over 95%. That's unbelievable. It's like a paradise. In Poland, it's around, in different periods, around 30–40% maximum after regaining independence. And it's not growing, it's not getting better. It's not only the result of the last 8 years, let's be honest. Lack of trust to the courts, to great extent, of course, distraction by the politicians, it's obvious. But we ourselves, we worked for that ourselves. Why? Different diagnoses, different reasons. And my thoughts are that it's also a result of our decisions and also procedures that we apply. Let me just mention about 2 things. The problem of judiciary results from the length of the temporary arrest, percentage of the adjudications in penal procedure, in civil procedure. It doesn't matter what it results from. Maybe we are overworked, maybe because the judge has 19 sessions a month, or documents that take up 16 shelves that you need to read, only the correspondence daily. A judge receives daily from 1 to 2 carriages like in a supermarket, carts of letters. And this is how this correspondence arrives to the judge, because it's too heavy. So maybe the overload of work connected with improper supervision that concentrates not on what the court should do, so to eliminate social conflicts, but concentrates on adjudications, on decisions. And this is not the same. So chasing the numbers, the results. In our court, which several years ago participated in the monitoring of management, we had this long-term survey of judges and officials. So the clients of the courts fulfilled a survey, and they did it willingly. Over 90% of officials were evaluated as the best ones. These were the people perceived by the stakeholders as competent, nice and kind, who wanted to help and assist to solve the issue. However, when it comes to judges, it was not more than 30% of positive opinions. Very low result. And I've been thinking why Professor Łętowska always repeated, justification, don't write hermetic justification that no one understands. write justifications to convince the people. That's number one. Such justifications are not supported by uncertainty of law. Why should we write several dozens of pages? Because if it's a short justification, someone else in a court somewhere can adjudicate that something was not considered. So we need to multiply the arguments, even though it's unnecessary. We've been through with this. But it's the 19th of September, and someone somewhere decides in a way that turns down the adjudication that was already informed, and then says that they are not going to follow the European law. That's why we need to write such long justification, but that's not all. It's said that the judges are not appreciated because 50% of people that leave the courtroom is unsatisfied because they lose, and only other 50% is happy. It's not the case. One patron said when the good decision is everyone is unsatisfied. That's the good decision. It's just an anecdote, but my neighbor had a court case, and he won it in the first instance. The second instance appealed, and he went to the appeal court still before the pandemic, and he won again. And he gets back, and he still has a very bad opinion about courts after this appeal hearing, to the extent that he wasn't even appealing against the reforms in 2017, where we're going to protest to the Supreme Court. He didn't join us. He won, but in his opinion, he was right, so he had to win. But you know, in the appeal court, how it looks like. What's the rush? What's the pace? Because you have to go home and write the justification and read the files for the next case. You win, you go. And his advocate stood up and he said if he supports the appeal, so he doesn't want to take too much time because everyone's going to get irritated. And my neighbor, he wants to say something. And he gets up and he says, I want to say something. And the judge says, your advocate says that you're fine and that's enough, you can go, you can leave. Until today, he has a bad opinion about courts because he was not listened to. So our opinion is not to adjudicate and just reach the number. Our role is to listen to people and solve social problems. This is not necessarily the quickest adjudication. Sometimes it's worth taking much more time and mediate. It's not awarded. It's not appreciated. So if someone wants to get promoted, they need to follow the Excel file, follow the statistics to show how effective he or she is statistically. The other issue is I don't know how to do it. Maybe this would be a question to our guest from the Netherlands. How evaluation of the judges should be performed. How should we follow the permanent supervision and evaluation to prohibit profiling of judges that is happening right now? The parties, they profile the judges and they select who they want, who they don't want, with different measures. For example, they don't pay for the case until they get the judge they want. Of course, it's a funny example, but in many cases, in penal cases, it's a problem. But I think it's another topic. I think it's another topic. No. Because if we are supposed to have those tests and selection procedures, how to do it in a way that the parties wouldn't be able to say that they want another judge. I think those soft competences are very necessary. All those tests are necessary. But how to prevent the parties to choose? I don't want this judge that has those competences level 3 instead of 5. And the last thing, just 2 last sentences, participation of the judges in those nominations. Let me say something that might be surprising for a judge, but I would be very careful, only because I'm from the middle and from inside, and my voice is a voice of a person that knows the community, our advantages and unfortunately disadvantages. And I would be very careful. And we need to refer to the opinion of Anthony Collins in C-181 and C-269-21 of 15 December 2022. The participation of self-government should not be perceived as something that is necessary, because it shouldn't be necessary. We can be just an advisory, but the risk of being biased is great. It's too big to allow the judges to have a deciding voice in selection. And without any additional anecdotes, I would like to finish my speech. Thank you so much. Council.
Ja przedstawiam pana mecenasa jako pana mecenasa. Jest adwokatem, ale pan mecenas przez lata był.
My experience as a counsel is shorter than a judge because I was a judge for 7 years. From what I understood, this conference is about the requirements towards the judges, and they are not like the requirements in the Netherlands. Mainly because the criterion of personality is decisive. I need to say that in Poland we don't that much verify the personality. We just need a certificate from a psychologist. But that's just the minimum. And I know that from my experience because my wife is a psychotherapist, so I can say that I got the certificate as a husband, because I went through this examination and therapy very thoroughly at home. So when I went to see the psychologist, I knew already what they're going to ask, so it was just a fraction of what can you learn about the person if we actually had this procedure in place. In my opinion, this is what we should do, and I would ask a question because from what I understood, this commission also examines this psychological aspect and conditions. Are there any standard methodologies of performing those tests? Are there any specific tests that needs to be conducted, like MPI or any other tests to analyze the issue connected with personality of a judge? So person that should be concentrated on listening. Yes, 5 tests, but those were tests that concerned only abstract thinking and so on and so forth. So maybe we could use your methodology somehow and standardize those tests in order to exclude some situations. That's all. Thank you.
Let's see. Well, one of the questions that triggered me is how to convince our judges that in Poland it would be a good idea to do it the same. I don't know. But what I do know is what we experience in the Netherlands is that are internal selectors. There are only 12 in the whole country, but the judges really like to become an internal selector because they see the importance of it. And then on the other hand, a part of the selection procedure is also the local procedure. We have the local judges that really want to proceed. Why? Because it's of great importance to have a colleague that is fit for the job, because you form a panel together, and when you sit in a panel with a colleague that's not fit for the job, then you also have a problem, because it means more work for you, and our workload is already more than enough. So in the Netherlands, the judges didn't need any convincement at all. They were convinced at forehand, because it means for them that they benefit from it as well.
I was asking about external selection.
Yes, that is what Judith will answer. Yes. Let's see. Well, there was also a question about how if it's 100% objective or if it's 100% proof or selection procedure. I would say, of course not, because it cannot be 100% objective. But we try with the procedure as we put it together to be as most objective as it can, and to help us select the people that are fit for the job and for the education they get. And we have a percentage of almost 90% of people that we select and that go with a positive end to the end of their education to become a judge. So that's quite a high score, I would say. Another question was about if you can object to any outcome of the selection procedure. You cannot object to it, but you can complain about it. We have a procedure where you can put in a complaint. And once you're a judge in training, when there's the moments of evaluation that are positive or negative, you can have a court hearing about that. If you do not agree on your evaluation, then you can appeal to that. So that is a measure we have. The external selectors,
yes,
there was a question about that.
Yeah,
yes,
external selectors. Who are the external selectors? Was that the question? Yeah. Did I? Okay. Well, they are with 10, and we try to make the group as diverse as possible. What we did write down in our directive, we mentioned it at the beginning, there must be in the group of 10, 1 advocate and 1 prosecutor. So then there's still 8 people left, and the 8 people are people from different backgrounds. So we try to have all the aspects of what's important in society, to have them in our group. So we have also a psychiatrist in the group. We have somebody who is busy with water management. We have a lot of dikes in Holland, you know, a lot of water. So we need a lot of water management. So she's a dike graph, as we call them. We have people who work for a hospital. They are like in the board of a hospital. We have somebody who was a mayor before. So there's a lot of people. And how do we select them? It's the same way as a normal job. They have to apply to a vacancy. And then we have a committee. We showed it in our presentation. I think maybe you will share it. I'm not sure. But yes, we have a committee. And so they have to apply to the vacancy. And there are a lot of people who want to be.
On the same basis? Do they apply?
Yes, they do apply. Yes, everybody has to apply, and everybody has to go to the same procedure. So they have to do interviews, and we try really to look what I said before, to make the group as diverse as possible. So 1, we look at, are you acquainted with doing interviews and with our method, and do you support the method? Otherwise, it won't work. But we also look at your background, so to make the group diverse. And yeah. That's what I think I can tell you. And maybe to end this session, you asked the question about the personality. How do we measure it? Well, we measured it in the personality tests. They filled in a lot of forms about their personality at home, the candidates. And it's based on the Big Five, and it's in your report too, so you can read about it in Bartosz' file. And those tests are taken to the interviews, so the psychiatrist takes them to the interviews and uses them to base his interview on, and also the role play. So he looks at your results and then he knows what he wanted to ask to dive deeper into your personality. So that's how we measure it. I think this was it.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this lively discussion, and I hope you will apologize the delay. But to us, it was very interesting. It was interesting to know your perspective, and your remarks were very useful for us indeed. You will be able to use them in your further work, and hopefully it was interesting to you as well. And the reports that you saw and that you received in paper form are also available on our website in electronic form under this address. So if you want to recommend someone to read it, I encourage you to see this website. The report and the map is available in Polish and in English. So thank you so much for coming.